I think it says a lot about this group. I mean, we've got a deep team. We've got a great mix of veterans who have been in this league.
You're watching Ballgorithm USA, where basketball becomes legend. The arena wasn't just alive, it was electric. From the moment the players stepped onto the hardwood at Carver-Hawkeye Arena, the air buzzed like static before a lightning strike. And right at the center of it all, Caitlin Clark. Back on familiar ground, but this wasn't nostalgia. This was business. And business started fast. No settling in, no warming up. Clark seized the ball in transition like she was picking up where she left off last season. You could feel it, the pace, the intensity, the silence before eruption. She brought it up, eyes scanning, reading every twitch of Brazil's defense. Then she did what she's built her name on. One step past half court, a sudden stop, effortless elevation. And with the flick of her wrist, time paused. The crowd rose as if pulled by a string. Splash, a deep three, a message, a warning. Indiana wasn't here to participate. They were here to ignite. And just like that, with one shot, the tempo of the entire night shifted. The opening play had Brazil already playing catch-up, not on the scoreboard, but mentally. Their defense scrambled, their feet shuffled quicker, and Caitlin smelled that hesitation. The next possession wasn't a solo act, it was a symphony. Clark brought the ball across again, this time drawing two defenders like gravity bending. Light. A double drag screen sliced her path open like a blade through silk, and in a single breath, she found the gap. But instead of forcing the shot, she made the smarter play, a bounce pass, quick and intentional, to Aaliyah Boston on the short roll. Boston, cool and calculated, barely blinked before firing the pass to the corner, and waiting there like she knew the moment was hers. Bonner, release, rotation, net. Indiana wasn't just scoring, they were orchestrating. It was beautiful chaos. Brazil tried to keep pace, adjusting their coverages, switching with more urgency. But the Fever's offense was too fluid. One moment, Clark was the decoy. The next, she was the catalyst. And through it all, the basketball never stopped moving. Indiana was sculpting basketball, carving into Brazil's defense like an artist with a vision. But no masterpiece is flawless. There was a crack, a fumble in the lane. The ball popped loose, tumbling just beyond the reach of outstretched hands. For a second, Brazil saw a sliver of hope, a mistake, a moment they could capitalize on. But hesitation is fatal. Before the ball could even hit the floor twice, Kelsey Mitchell was there, calm, controlled, collected. She scooped it like it was always meant to be hers, rose up behind the arc with defenders still resetting, and boom. A whistle. Contact. And as the ball splashed through, the call echoed across the court. And one. The crowd erupted, not just for the basket, but for the statement. Indiana wasn't reacting to Brazil's moves. They were writing the script. And Mitchell's four-point play was just another chapter. At this point, it was clear. This wasn't a game between equals. Brazil had heart, no doubt. But Indiana had a rhythm, a soul. And they played as if every pass, every screen, every release was part of something larger, something inevitable. And it all started with Clark. Her presence on the floor was more than just talent. It was gravity. When she moved, defenders followed. When she paused, they hesitated. And when she let the ball fly, the arena held its breath, not in fear of a miss, but in expectation of greatness. There were moments when Brazil showed flashes, a steal here, a fast break push, a strong closeout. But each time they reached out for momentum, Indiana snatched it back like a thief in the night. Whether it was Boston's footwork in the post, Bonner's calm from deep, or Mitchell's killer instinct from beyond the arc, the Fever came ready for war. Sometimes the real beauty of basketball isn't in the points, the pace, or even the plays. It's in the pulse. And Indiana's pulse? It was pounding with purpose. There was no hesitation, no fear, just fire. It started like a spark. Aaliyah Boston fighting through contact, diving into the chaos, and clawing the ball free like a warrior in the trenches. It wasn't clean, it wasn't easy, but it was earned. That's how Indiana opened their second act, with grit. Boston's recovery lit the fuse. Howard saw it, Coulson felt it, and suddenly they were off, sprinting the floor like a pack of wolves on the hunt. Then came the trickery. Coulson, with flair and finesse, went behind the back in stride, freezing the defense mid-chase. The crowd gasped. Caitlin Clark smiled. No words were needed. The game was in their hands now, not just in rhythm, but in sync. And just when Brazil tried to stabilize, timeout called, fresh breath drawn, Indiana came right back, fearless. Clark came off a handoff, defenders smothering, bodies pressing. But she didn't back off. She powered through. She dropped her shoulder and wrapped a pass through the collapsing bodies like a magician pulling silk through a locked box. Ball movement followed, quick, crisp, sharp. Cunningham, Cox, contact, bucket. And the whistle screamed, and one. Indiana wasn't just playing basketball. They were composing it. Commentators struggled to keep up with what was unfolding. The pace, the poise, the purpose. And somewhere in between the chaos, a voice said what everyone already knew. It's just fun to watch this team play basketball. That's what it was. Pure joy, pure movement, dribble, penetrate, kick, swing, extra pass, corner three, swish. They weren't hunting shots. They were chasing perfection. And Natasha Howard, she was the anchor in motion, reading space, attacking gaps, defending with bite, fitting like the last piece in a championship puzzle. There was no hesitation in her movement, no pause in her decision-making. She wasn't playing to fit in, she was playing to elevate. Then came Michaela Timpson, the rookie, the risk, the reward. She wasn't just on the floor, she belonged there. The play came fast, Brazil pushing, testing Indiana's perimeter. And Timpson, fearless, stepped up with active hands and a fearless read. Swipe, steal, one step, two steps, gather. And she was gone. The layup wasn't just 2 points. It was trust. It was arrival. It was Indiana saying, this team runs all deep. This team is ready. And somewhere on the bench, Stephanie White smiled, because she knew. She knew this wasn't just a preseason roster, it was a problem. Then came the inbounds, simple, efficient, Clark in motion. A cut, a catch, a trigger, three, no dribble, no extra move, just muscle memory. She had barely broken a sweat, but her presence bent the court like gravity. At that point, she had 3 points, 3 rebounds, and 1 assist. And yet, she was controlling the tempo of the entire arena. Kelsey Mitchell, already in double figures. But this was never about stats. It was about presence, about feel, about fearlessness. Then came the moment when expectation turned into eruption. Clark caught the ball again, a few feet behind the arc, but not just any arc. The logo. There were no seconds to spare, no reason to shoot, except one. She could, and she did. A bomb, a rainbow, a gasp, and then net. She turned. She pointed, not in arrogance, but in assurance. You knew it was going in. At that point, there was no denying it. Caitlin Clark had turned a basketball court into a canvas, and every possession was a brushstroke. You couldn't write this. You couldn't teach this. You could only feel it. And Indiana, they felt it in their bones. Off a miss, Clark launched again. Not a shot this time, but a touchdown. A full-court, quarterback-level strike to Bonner, who didn't even need to break stride. She caught, she finished. The kind of connection that only comes when two players don't just see the floor, they feel it. And the crowd, they weren't just cheering, they were witnessing. Somewhere in the booth, A commentator mentioned Angel Reese, her talk earlier, in the week about spacing, and Camila Cardoso's interior presence in a 4-out, 1-in system, about creating lanes, finding rhythm, learning flow. But what Indiana was doing, this wasn't spacing. This was separation of tiers, of tempo, of teams. Then came Jaylen Brown, not the NBA star, but a spark plug off the fever bench who wanted her name in the moment. And she took it. Second half, chaos unfolding, and Brown picked her spot, timed her hands, reached in, swiped clean, steal. She broke out, full speed, legs churning, eyes on the prize. The layup didn't fall. But it didn't need to. Because in that sprint, in that steal, she showed the identity of this team. The second half didn't just begin, it erupted. Everything Indiana had been building in the first 2 quarters came crashing forward like a tidal wave. The pace quickened, the passes sharpened, and Caitlin Clark, she lit the fuse. Off a turnover, she pounced like a hawk. Instinct took over. One motion, full court vision, and a dish to Boston streaking in stride. Float game, pure. The net barely moved. The crowd, explosive. There's a particular roar that only comes from seeing something you feel coming. A collective gasp that turns into thunder. And it didn't stop there. Clark again. This time, catching high and attacking with purpose. She drove the lane like it belonged to her, defenders trailing behind like a shadow in her storm. Then, with that signature flick, a soft floater, touch as light as silk, falling true. Indiana was in rhythm now. Not the kind that's measured by tempo, but the kind that lives in heartbeats. It wasn't just execution, it was electricity. Then came Mitchell, the veteran, the weapon. She didn't just find space, she created it. A stutter, a hesitation, then a sudden glide through. Brazil's defense like she owned the air. She cupped it, cradled it, and kissed it off the glass. It was more than scoring, it was statement making. Then silence, because what happened next, no one expected. Clark, past half court, standing beyond the logo, took a glance. Maybe at the clock, maybe at the crowd, maybe at nothing at all. She stepped forward and launched. The ball hung in the air longer than it should have. Time slowed, and then, swish. A shot from the parking lot, from memory, from madness. She didn't celebrate with screams. She didn't need to. A small point, a glance, the kind of reaction that says, yeah, I do this. It wasn't cockiness, it was confirmation. In that moment, the arena wasn't watching a player. They were watching a phenomenon. On the sideline, commentary shifted. Angel Reese had been talking earlier about spacing, about structure, about growth. But what Clark and Indiana were doing, that wasn't just spacing. That was surgical separation. 4 out, 1 in, try 5 flying, no fear. The game was opening wider by the second, and Indiana was racing through it like they had written the playbook. Then came Jaylen Brown, not just stepping up, taking over. Big moments find certain players, and tonight, Brown answered every single one. A steal at the wing, the anticipation, the hunger, and then the breakaway. She pushed forward, crowd. Rising, hearts pounding, but the finish didn't fall. No matter, because even in the miss, the message was there. Indiana was everywhere. They weren't just playing this game, they were controlling it.